Right, Tinzwe, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of Taura Tinzwe, the show where your perspective matters. And we're talking fatherhood again. We're talking perspectives from fatherhood based on different people with their different experiences. Today, we've got one such person. His name is Nathan. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks very much for having me, Ronald.
Well, I appreciate you for having for giving us the time, really, and the honor. I know you're a busy man. You know, auditing is something that's tough for you there, and really, I don't advise you to go to this guy with the books because he's going to expose you. But otherwise, Nathan, you're a man of the clock, if I can put it like that. I think we met really in church circumstances. We're organizing the Tanzania Olympics. And even though your team was losing perennially at those Olympics, we've talked a lot more after that. And you've kind of really spoken a lot, and you're passionate about men issues and fatherhood issues. Where does this passion come from? Why are you finding yourself in this place where you have to speak a lot about such things?
Well, firstly, I think most of my passion comes from actually growing up with a father who was very hands-on in my, I'd say between when I was born and up until at least my teen years, where he was actually hands-on. And then I've got two younger brothers. So I got the privilege to see my parents' marriage from beginning to end, and I got to see how my father treated myself and how he treated my younger brothers as well. And then I got to see the difference in between how you actually treat kids and how it actually affects them as they grow up.
Sure.
So as growing up, I then started speaking to a lot of men, I started speaking to a lot of boys, and then I started seeing what society is actually, what's happening in society, and that's where the passion actually grew up. In the church that I was in, I was leading men, although in a soccer team. And when you have conversations with different people from different backgrounds, you then get to realize that fathers play a very big role in how a young boy actually grows up. So that's where the core of the passion that I have actually came from.
All right. And I think you mentioned there that you saw somewhat of a difference between how your dad gave and devoted much time to you when you were growing up as a boy versus to what happened to your brothers afterwards. What was the change? What brought about that difference in the treatment that you guys got, you think?
Okay, so I'm my dad's firstborn, so I believe he wanted to be really hands-on with me. And then as time goes on, like, he took me to everything. Like everything that I loved is because of his influence.
Okay.
And one thing that fathers or men don't actually realize is that once you have a son, you are automatically his hero.
Okay.
From a very young age. He models every single thing that you do, whether you like it or not. He models the things you like, whatever it is that you eat, how you walk, how you address yourself. And that was no difference with myself. My dad took me to church. Whenever he had choir practice, he took me there.
Yeah.
To soccer games, that's where he took me. That's where I actually developed the love for the greatest team in South Africa. It's the greatest team in Africa, which is Orlando Pirates. Although it doesn't, the evidence is of it it's not there at the moment.
Sure.
But he was extremely hands-on with me when I was younger. But then when my brothers got to that age, that's when now politics started coming in, and his duties in the church actually started becoming a bit more, and then that's where he started giving more attention outside. Okay. And then my brothers didn't actually get that privilege. And the thing about it is that you may be a mother, and no matter how good of a mother you are, there is only up until a certain point where a father needs to start kicking in.
Yeah.
And with me, I had that privilege. I knew that at 7 p.m. I needed to be at home. I had that discipline because there is nothing more powerful. I think it's Chris Rock who said that there's nothing more powerful than I'm gonna tell you dad. Like I had that fear that, okay, fine, if I do 1, 2, 3, I know my dad's gonna know about it. Yeah. But then once more responsibility starts kicking in, then it starts becoming a bit more like now the mother needs to play both roles. Yeah. So that's the challenge that I actually got to experience, and I actually got to see with my younger brothers as compared to me.
So you're saying in terms of his career commitments, politics, I'm assuming you're talking about career politics, not necessarily politics in
career politics.
Okay, all right. So when that branch took a turn in his career, then you started to see a shift from your perspective anyway, in the manner in which he was hands-on with yourself and your brothers. would you say then that's something that has influenced somewhat how you, when you have your conversations with your mentees, as someone who's a mentor back at your church, something that you kind of realize that, hey man, that space and that availability, the change, the transition thereof, actually affects a boy child as they're growing up?
Exactly, because now you need to realize that as we grow, as men grow, we are predominantly, most of the men that we have today are it's a generation that hasn't really been raised by men. And even if we are raised by men, the father is either not available or he's just not like trash, so to say.
Yeah.
So now we have a whole lot of young boys who are trying to be something that they've never seen at home. If you do the statistics properly, the research will tell you that if you go into prison, any guy who you might have seen lost his way, the one question, if you ask that, where's your father, you'll find that either the father is absent, or the relationship with the father is non-existent, or the father is there and just not available at all.
Yeah.
So the availability of a father in a household becomes very important to how a guy actually grows up. We get to the age of 18 and then you expect a man to be a man, but then you don't look at the background. Is there anything that he was actually modeling? Is there anything that he actually uses as a role model to say that, okay, fine, that's who I want to be like? Is there anyone guiding him in any way? When you're going the wrong way, is there anyone telling him, okay, fine, no, you're going the wrong way, come back this way? Most of us have to pave our own way, especially when you are firstborn. You make a lot of mistakes on your own. You need to learn by trial and error. There's no one who told you, okay, fine, I walked this road, this is not how you do it.
Sure.
So that is a big challenge that we actually find in the young men that I've actually spoken to. Some of the guys are actually older than me, and when you speak to them, they'll tell you pretty much the same thing, that most of the mistakes that they make, because I'm a person who models a lot.
Yeah.
Like if I see a person making a mistake, I learn from that mistake that you have made, and I try my best not to make the same mistake that another person has made. But now when you have nothing to actually work on, it becomes a big challenge, but then society expects you to get this manhood thing correct from the word go, which is the challenge that us as men actually face now.
I think you mentioned something very interesting there, and I think coming from a statistical perspective, when I was writing the book, Father and Sons, I kind of got to discover that in this current day and age, and actually even the time we were growing up, the stats really haven't changed much. But in essence, about 6 out of 10 children in South Africa are growing up without a father at home for whatever reason. They divorced, they passed away, they never knew them, whatever the case may be. But 6 out of 10 don't have that male figure in the house. You have the privilege, and you correctly recognize the impact that a father has, obviously based on the experience that you've had with your dad and looking at the guys that didn't have their dads in their lives. Now, in terms of the ministry aspect, you've dealt a lot with young men who come from such backgrounds, who don't have dads. What are the 2-3 things potentially that you see in them that's lacking as a result of not having had a father compared to what you had growing up?
I think one thing that I've really picked up is that there's lack of guidance and lack of confidence within identity in what a man actually is. Because once you don't have that father to actually teach you what a man actually is, because this is what happens when you are young. So you live in the household maybe from the age of 3 to 10.
Sure.
All right. That's where now the nurturing of the mother becomes very important, because then, okay, fine, you're at home, you get it's simple rules. Eat your dinner at this time, you sleep at this time, do your homework. You see, those are simple rules. But then now masculinity starts to kick in, and the testosterone also starts to kick in at the ages of 11, 12, 13. The teenager starts to kick in. They call it the adolescent phase. That's where now you need a father who needs to actually guide you, because with the absence of a father, it doesn't necessarily have to be the biological father. It can be an uncle, but there needs to be a father figure to actually guide a boy child. Because now without that father figure to guide the boy child, is now we're going to have to learn, the child now has to learn how to be a man from the streets. And what does the streets say? The streets says that the woman is a commodity, money is everything. And that's what most of them actually now start to because now that's where they actually need to try and fit in, because there is no father to actually guide. Okay, fine, that's not how to treat a woman. Money isn't really everything. You need to pay attention to 1, 2, 3. These are the most important things in life. We don't have that kind of guidance, and we start we get the guidance from our peers.
Sure.
And the peers' guidance is what has actually led to the chaos that we see right now.
True.
So that is the biggest distinction that you'll actually see, especially in the teen years, because that is the very critical period in a boy's life. It's a very critical period, and without anyone to actually guide you, it does not have to be the biological father, because fathers right nowadays are absent anyway.
That's true.
But you need that older brother or that uncle to actually teach you what a man actually is, because right now society has actually messed up the definition of manhood.
Okay.
We are trying to find that identity. Most of us, your definition of manhood might be different to mine, which is why the world is such a chaos, is in such chaos at the moment. So that's the biggest distinction that I would say that I picked up as to what's lacking within.
Right. So you mentioned something very important here regarding the link between what men see at home, obviously, in terms of romantic relationships and how they deal with women going forward. What would you say are some of the things that you picked up, with the guys that you're dealing with at church and just basically in society, perhaps at work, in how they exert themselves and seeing, potentially identifying some lack, that potentially they couldn't see something good at their house and that's why they're treating their women like this?
I think it'll pretty much boil back to what I mentioned about men modeling what it is that boys modeling what it is that they see that they see at home. One thing that I think we take for granted, or not necessarily for granted, or we tend to ignore, is the fact that most of our young men are actually broken.
Okay.
They come from broken families, they come from broken homes. And that brokenness then comes into manhood without it being dealt with.
Sure.
It then comes in as a frustration, and then boys tend up to implode as they get older. So they try to get back their masculinity, because we haven't really defined manhood. We've told that manhood might be strength. Now, what happens then when a guy becomes disabled? Does he then lose his manhood? We say that manhood is defined by the amount of money that you make. What happens then when a guy loses his job? What happens to us men, because we haven't really defined that manhood, is that now we try to find our manhood elsewhere in finding a person who might be weaker, and that's where the abuse actually starts to kick in.
Sure.
And that's where now, because now I don't have money and she's making more, I start feeling intimidated, to the point that's where now violence would actually start to kick in. If I become disabled, that's when now emotional abuse starts to kick in, because now I feel less of a man, because we haven't really defined this, and we haven't actually had men teaching us from a young age that that's not necessarily manhood. So I think as men right now, we need to actually get the proper definition and actually teach it to the next generation. Because our generation is already messed up.
Okay.
So it is our duty to actually go down to the younger generation and actually fix what it is that wasn't actually fixed with our generation.
Talking about fixing there, you see, if you read the newspaper today, you go on Facebook, you go on Twitter, there's trends every other day, somebody's been killed, justice for Mang, men are trash, etc. And we see these things. I think, like you correctly put it, are linked to what men have seen at home, and obviously what they tend to become then based on the model that they've gotten. Are we fighting a losing battle here? Do you think we can really change how men think and stop this violence that we're seeing on a daily basis?
I think to say we're fighting a losing battle would be us giving up. And that's one thing that we cannot give up on them, and we cannot give up on the future generation. But what we need to do is we need to fix our families. We need to fix our homes. We need to stop relying on the headmasters or principals to actually take over the father role. We need to stop relying on pastors to take over the father role. We need to start being the priest in the household and actually start fixing the families, because once you start fixing the families, then you have better communities. And once you have better communities, then you have better churches as well. So that's actually how it actually links up together, but it all starts at home. The problem now is that we are going out with banners thinking that hashtags and raising awareness in the streets will actually fix what's happening in the household. And I'm all for it, I support it, but I don't think that is the absolute thing that will actually assist, because the very same perpetrators who go on and they
start the hashtag.
And they start the hashtag would be the very same person who will go home and then abuse his girlfriend or wife. So we need to really start sorting out what is going on in our houses, not necessarily in the church, but in our house. That's where it actually starts. Because once you fix that, you cannot put the whole purpose or the whole responsibility on the churches or on the schools to actually fix our to fix our men. We need to start doing it back at home. That's where it all starts.
And I think that's a message that also comes through strongly in the book that I wrote about, the need for fathers to take their place and to start teaching their kids. And like you said earlier again, not obviously restrict to the biological sense of fatherhood, but if there is no father, then Malume takes that place. Kulu or whoever man can really guide and show boys the way going forward.
Absolutely.
But and I hear you and I believe that, like I said, from a book it comes through very strongly, and that speaks then to the next generation. So let's try and work towards fixing stuff that's happening currently in the next generation. Now we've got that lag and that gap between then and now. What do we do with the boys, with the men that are broken from then and until we get to there? In the meantime, what do we do? How do we really, do you have any practical tips you think perhaps in the dealing that you've had with the various men that we can implement now, try and make a difference in society?
I think this popped up in one of the questions in one of the conversations that you and I had, is that most of us mess up when we think we've got it all under control on our own. You don't have that individual that you can actually express yourself to. You don't have that individual that you can actually speak to. You don't have that the person that you can actually be accountable to. You see, Jake said this, and I strongly believe it because it worked in my life. I realized that most of the messes that I made was when I told myself that I can handle it and then I don't need to discuss anything with anyone.
Sure.
Is that every man, I don't care who it is or how high that person is, every man needs at least one person in their life that has the right to call them out on their behavior.
Okay.
And the reason why most of us are still messing up and we are failing to reach it is that we don't want to be held accountable.
Sure.
We don't have that one person to actually hold us accountable, because it's one thing for you to ask me to hold you accountable, but it's a totally different thing for me to appoint myself as your accountability person.
Sure.
Because now you won't be receptive, like you won't receive it. So as men, first of all, we need to realize that we have a problem. That's the first point. That's where we need to realize that.
Sure.
The men need to realize, okay, fine, listen, as a man, as myself, as Nathan, I've got a problem. And with that problem, I need someone that I will be able to confide in. I need someone that I can be able to talk to. I need someone who will be able to push me back into line.
Yeah.
This is a two-way street. There is no one way that you and I can go and say we are going to fix a certain group of people. That certain group of people need to realize that they have a problem as well,
Sure.
and need help as well. So that's where this raising awareness, it helps in the sense that it's starting to show men that there is a problem, we have a problem, and we are the problem. But here's the thing that we also need to realize, that we are the solution as well.
Sure.
That's the thing. But the toughest thing that you'll also find is that as men, we have a handicap of actually that we need to start growing, like we're growing in public. We're growing under the eye of scrutiny.
Yeah.
Just as you are trying to fix something, there is someone showing you something that you are not doing right. And then that discourages you from even trying to, that's where the discouragement actually comes across. We need to start encouraging the men, to show them that as you are doing, give them encouragement when they're doing something right. If you're doing something right, because the minute you give a man encouragement or you praise a man for something that they're doing right, then that one thing that they're doing wrong, they're going to want to fix it on their own as well. They're going to identify, okay, fine, there's something else that I need to also try to fix. But if he's trying to do something right this side, and then he's falling short on one side, and you're focusing on that side, he's going to eventually give up on the other. And that's where you see a generation where it just says, you know what, it is what it is.
I think you touched on something very important there in terms of us extolling and encouraging each other as men in general. I think it's something that really comes strongly in the book as well. And to give that sort of encouragement also makes someone feel a bit more confident in who they are as a person, and most probably as well, whatever they do, they kind of come from that perspective of understanding firstly their identity and who then they can be as a result of the encouragement that they're receiving, like you just mentioned there. Yeah. But that, speaking about that as well, in the accountability aspect that you touched on earlier, means we must talk. And as guys, generally we are not talkers. How do we break this code then? How do we say, okay, let's start talking?
That's a very tough one. Because having led men you find it's very difficult for them to actually open up. I remember the one session, I think it was after the women murder, where we had a game on the Saturday, and the mood was just down. The mood was just down. We were about to share, then I just asked the guys, okay, fine, guys, what's wrong? All they could say was gender-based violence. Okay, fine, what about gender-based violence? They just couldn't, they didn't have a response. It's like we've gotten to a point where we as men, we don't even know what to do. I go to women and I ask them, okay, fine, what is it that men can do? Because I got to realize that men actually, they realize that there's a problem.
Yeah.
But we don't really know what it is that we need. We need to start talking, but how do you even start to get a man to talk? How do you even start to get a man to actually realize that, you know what, I fall short in this area?
Sure.
Because here's the thing about men that we need to realize. I don't care how old you are, but you need to realize that every man has got a section in his life which is strong in, and there is a point in his life that you are weak in. We need to make men realize that there is a section in your life which you are king, but there's a section in your life where you are a total child, where it totally defeats you. You are totally mature here, but you're totally immature here. But then the problem is that as men, we don't want to expose the part in which we are immature in. So when we do talk, we only talk about the positives. I don't talk about it. I don't talk about my shortfalls, and therefore when I don't talk about my shortfalls, then we are unable to actually address those shortfalls. You see, so that's the biggest challenge which we have. That's the biggest challenge which we have as men. Where do we even start when we start talking? Even when we are going to talk, we need to start digging deep into what it is that we are actually encountering and the challenges that we are actually encountering.
And I think it's always easier to talk about football, of course, and how Chelsea is going to win the Champions League and all that kind of stuff. But I like to end the interviews with this, that if you had a chance to speak to every man in the world and had this stage, and just imagine every man in the world would watch this video right now, what message would you want to leave with them to say, Mafetu, this is what I think is the thing?
The message that I would leave to all men is that let's not give up. We're growing under the eye of scrutiny. It is a very difficult time right now that we live in. Women are unhappy with us. They are trashing us everywhere. We are trying to grow while having insults thrown at us. But the key thing is that we should not give up. The minute we give up on ourselves, we're giving up on the next generation, and that's the end of us. This thing is just going to recycle itself all over again. If we do not stand up, let us be the generation that actually breaks this trend. A lot of men are committing suicide in the middle of their ages. The stats say that men are 3 times more likely to commit suicide than women because of the pressure that we actually have and that we actually give up on manhood. On our way to actually discovering the kind of man that we are, on identifying who we actually are or who we're actually created to be, most men tend to give up because we try to grow under the microscope with people watching us, watching our every single move. Every time you try to do something right and then you make a mistake somewhere, that gets magnified. So as men, we need to encourage each other not to give up on the next generation, because the minute we give up on ourselves, then that's us giving up on the next generation. But we need to be the generation that breaks this trend.
Sure.
This trend has been going on for too long. It's been recycling itself year in, year out. We speak about this person, we speak about Karabo this year, then the next year we speak about Renee, then the next year it's the next person. This thing is just going to keep on recycling itself until we stand up, and we don't give up on the next generation. We don't give up on actually being what it is that we are created to be, and that is the protectors of the young, of the women, and the children of this world, the very people that we men are guilty of actually abusing. So we really need not give up, irrespective of the challenges, irrespective of the hammers that it is that we get. We really do not need to give up, because the minute we do that, then that's it. This thing is just going to recycle. 3,000 years from now on, 2 people will be sitting here talking about the same issues. We cannot have that.
Let us be that generation. Let us be that generation. Let us be that generation. You heard it from yourself. Nathan, thank you very much. It was a privilege and an honor, I think, speaking to you. And I'm really hoping, like you said, that us having these conversations will encourage men out there to know and hear what exactly are we supposed to do to change these things, so that 3,000 years from now, we don't change the things. I probably won't be alive and you'll be dead. But
yeah, no, I'll still be around. I won't be cool to talk to or anything, but I'll still be around.
It's a pleasure. This is Taura Tinzwe. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.